Salt Lake City, known for its incredible skiing, beautiful mountain views of the Wasatch Front, and of course its namesake, the Great Salt Lake. Salt Lake City and the Wasatch Front metropolitan region have been seeing massive population growth along with other southwestern cities, and with this comes a need to get people from place to place. For most of its existence, the greater Salt Lake City area has gone with the traditional American plan of widening roadways and building highways that separate neighborhoods from each other. However, in the past 30 years, Salt Lake City has had quite the change of heart in terms of transit planning for the region. So how did Utah's premier city break the mold of car-dependent planning, and how are they planning to go forward from this outdated era of transit planning? The history of rail transit in Salt Lake City is almost as old as the city itself, with some of the first streetcar lines opening in the city around 1873. These lines were pulled by mules and horses until they were electrified in 1889, greatly speeding up operation and allowing for easier expansion of the lines around the city. Other cities along the Wasatch Front, such as Ogden and Provo, would also end up developing streetcar networks of their own. The network of streetcar companies around Salt Lake City would end up being consolidated under the Utah Light and Traction Company in 1914. They would proceed to manage the streetcars throughout the 20s and 30s. However, in the late 30s and 40s, the streetcars were quickly being replaced with the new innovation of the day, buses. By 1946, they had removed the majority of the city's streetcar network and left Salt Lake City with just a bus network. This is basically the history of every streetcar network in North America minus like one or two cities. But back in Salt Lake City, transit ridership during the 50s was in a total free fall due to a mix of the removal of said streetcars and the major subsidies to car infrastructure and gas. The city had to do something to stop this massive free fall in ridership on its buses. While many of the bus lines in the city would end up consolidating in the 50s, this wasn't enough to help stem the tide of the declining ridership. So in 1969, the state legislature passed the Utah Public Transit District Act. This act granted permission for cities to form their own public transit district to fund, operate, maintain, and expand transit services. And in March of 1970, the Utah Transit Authority was formed, with the founding cities being Sandy, Murray, and Salt Lake. Other cities and counties would eventually join in over the next couple decades, including Weber, Davis, and Utah County. During this time, UTA would begin to retool bus services and streamline operations, as well as beginning the ever so popular ski bus service, which takes people out to the nearby resort towns in 1976. Bus routes would continue to evolve and change over the following decades, but UTA had their eyes on the prize, and that prize was bringing back rail transit to the Salt Lake region. Because between the time that the final streetcar tracks were removed in 1946 and 1990, Salt Lake had more than tripled in population. This lack of rail transit not only made congestion on roads and highways a nightmare, but made air quality significantly worse. For those of you who haven't visited or lived in Salt Lake City, it is surrounded by some incredibly beautiful mountains. And while these are wonderful, they unfortunately do act like walls to trap in a lot of the air pollution in the valley. And while this might already sound bad, during the winter months, Salt Lake City deals with a phenomenon called inversions, where warm air above the valley traps cooler air within the valley. This essentially creates a pollution dome, and some days during the winter, Salt Lake City has the worst air quality in the world. Combine these two issues together, and you have the perfect excuse to build rail transit in the city. While in some areas there was initially heavy opposition to the plan, UTA used multiple sources for funding, including local taxes, state support, and federal support to fund the creation of 2 light rail lines within the city. While the initial plan only included funding for 1 line, additional federal support was given to the city in the 90s since it was scheduled to host the 2002 Winter Olympics. After 4 years of construction, in December of 1999, UTA opened the first line of the TRAX network, with 17 miles of service from downtown Salt Lake City to Sandy, Utah. This was quickly followed 2 years later in 2001 with the opening of the second line, running from the University of Utah's Rice-Eccles Stadium to downtown Salt Lake City, with construction of this 2.5-mile line being expedited to be ready for the 2002 Winter Olympic Games. Following the massive success of these first 2 lines, many communities around the greater Salt Lake area saw the potential benefits of getting rail transit service in their community and pushed for further extension of the system. Following the conclusion of the 2002 Winter Olympics, the line to Rice-Eccles Stadium was extended a couple miles east through the U of U campus to its current terminus at Medical Center. In 2008, the network was extended to connect with Salt Lake Central Station. This was done at the exact same time that UTA began to run their commuter rail service known as Frontrunner. With its first operations beginning in 2008, between between Ogden and Salt Lake Central. The commuter line would soon be extended much further south to Provo to provide service along the entire Wasatch Front in 2012. While this was going on, the TRAX network saw the completion of multiple major extensions, including the extension of service to Daybreak and Fair Park, the latter of which would become part of the TRAX connection to the airport, which would open in April of 2013. Later that same year, UTA would begin operations on the S-Line streetcar, which runs through South Salt Lake. But if you want to learn more about that small transit project, I have a video going more in depth on the S-Line on my Patreon. So if you want to learn more about it, or get access to extra videos, your name in the credits, early access to videos, or just support the channel, feel free to check out the Patreon. The link is down below. While this brings us to the current rail network for the greater Salt Lake region, UTA also invested heavily in bus rapid transit in the 2010s. With its first BRT line in the region, the Utah Valley Express, opening in 2018, the UVX provides bus rapid transit service to the city of Provo and Orem, with major stops for Brigham Young University and Utah Valley University, connecting last mile stops for Frontrunner. Similarly, on the other end of Frontrunner, the Ogden Express opened last year in 2023 and provides bus rapid transit service connecting McKay-Dee Hospital and Weber State University to Ogden's Frontrunner station. And that takes us to today as of 2024. So let's take a look at Like every other major transit system in North America other than MTA in New York City, a vast majority of ridership in the UTA network is taking buses. With 120 different bus routes, there's a wide variety of routes just in the buses alone. UTA categorizes their buses into 4 categories: frequent buses, local buses, limited buses, and ski buses. Frequent buses generally run every 15 minutes at peak service and generally run later than other routes. The local buses at best run every 30 minutes, but do vary in terms of service. These buses serve more local routes and are really what you think of as standard buses. The limited bus routes often follow existing frequent or local bus corridors and provide express rush hour service or service to job centers that usually only see 9 to 5 ridership. And the ski buses. These buses run seasonal service to the skiing resorts in the Wasatch Mountains and provide alternative options for skiers to get up to the mountains. While a vast majority of routes and transit coverage is done by local buses that don't get any priority on roads, UTA has been working on building up its rapid transit network, with the rapid network consisting of 3 different modes: TRAX, Frontrunner, and their BRT services. TRAX is the light rail branch of UTA's rapid transit, and it operates 3 lines mainly within Salt Lake City and the communities immediately surrounding it. With the red line that originates at University Medical Center just northeast of downtown, it then runs west just to the south of downtown, running along with the blue and the green line between Courthouse and Central Point and spurring off from the blue line to the southwest after Fashion Place West and ending at Daybreak Parkway. The blue line that begins at Draper Town Center running northwest until it joins up with the blue line at Fashion Place West and then runs north towards downtown, along with the green line after Central Point. After Courthouse Station, the line runs along with the green line up through downtown, then turning west after City Center and splitting off from the green line after the Arena Station. The blue line then runs southwest before ending at Salt Lake Central. And finally, we have the green line, which starts at West Valley Central and runs northeast towards downtown before joining up with the blue and red lines at Central Point before entering downtown with the blue line. After splitting from the blue line at Arena Station, the line continues heading northwest, heading towards its terminus at the airport. Frontrunner is UTA's commuter rail service, and it runs service throughout much of the greater Salt Lake area and serves as a main spine of service for major communities along it. It originates in Provo and runs north, serving many communities in Utah County and cities south of Salt Lake City before stopping just outside of downtown at Salt Lake Central and North Temple, and then continuing on to the city of Ogden where it reaches its northern terminus. Now, I know I just talked about UTA's bus services just a second ago, but they do differ from the standard bus services in a few ways. With improved frequency, bus lanes, signal priority, and improved buses and stations, these bus lines are a much more rapid form of transit, with the Utah Valley Express operating down in Provo and Orem, and the Ogden Express operating between McKay-Dee Hospital and Ogden Central. These lines provide much needed last mile connections for riders and encourage more trips to be taken by transit by providing frequent, reliable service corridors that in their current state cannot justify rail transit just yet. This leaves us with the current rapid transit network in Salt Lake City and the surrounding area, consisting of 3 light rail lines, 2 bus rapid transit lines, and a commuter rail line, which is actually really impressive for a large low density region. Even better is that the Utah Transit Authority and the greater Salt Lake area have plans to improve service and expand on the existing network. With a long-range plan called Utah Moves 2050 that was approved earlier this year in March of 2024, the UTA is looking to improve and expand service with multiple projects in phases over the next 25 years. So let's take a look at some of the projects that the Utah Transit Authority has planned in the near future and a little bit further out. With buses being the highest ridership mode in the region, the long-term plan for the UTA network is to improve bus services. One of the biggest improvements to the overall transit plan in the greater Salt Lake area is converting well over 24 of the routes running every 30 minutes into routes that will offer 15-minute service. This small change is going to be huge for ridership in the region, especially in Salt Lake City itself, where a majority of these new 15-minute bus corridors will be created, allowing people to hop on buses without having long waits or having to think about bus schedules like they did before. UTA is also looking to expand on the successes of the Bus Rapid Transit network, with one line currently under construction. The Mid-Valley Express just recently broke ground this year and will provide a frequent, more reliable service utilizing bus lanes and signal priority, as well as improved stations and buses between West Valley and Murray. With its opening expected sometime late in 2026, providing 7 miles of new rapid transit in the region. The Utah Transit Authority does have 2 other bus rapid transit projects for further on down the line. With the Davis Salt Lake City Community Connector, a 26-mile long bus rapid transit line from Research Park through downtown Salt Lake City, and then heading north to its terminus at the Farmington Frontrunner Station, and the 5600 West BRT line, which would serve many of the communities west of downtown Salt Lake City. While TRAX doesn't have any planned major extensions to the network, it is looking to add some smaller improvements and adjustments to the existing lines to make service more convenient to riders. One of the biggest changes that will likely be coming to TRAX is going to be the addition of the Orange Line. This line will be the 4th in the TRAX network and will connect the city's airport to downtown, Salt Lake Central, and Research Park. Most of the Orange Line will be running on the existing rail right-of-way. However, some new trackage in downtown would be created for the Orange Line to have a more direct routing through it. This change would also include a rerouting of the Green Line to end at Salt Lake Central instead of the airport. The Blue Line would then be rerouted to the airport instead of Salt Lake Central. Service on the Red Line would change, as it would be rerouted to provide more TRAX coverage to neighborhoods just to the southwest of downtown, and also to reduce interlining on the current right-of-way. The Utah Transit Authority also has some other projects planned for TRAX, such as a possible extension of the Blue Line south to Lehigh and possibly as far south as Orem, as well as a possible extension of the Red Line, which would see it run east from its current terminus in Daybreak and service the communities of Riverton and Draper. However, nothing has really been set in stone yet, and it honestly seems like the Utah Transit Authority's main priorities have shifted over towards expanding the bus rapid transit network and massively improving the region's main form of fast rail transit, the S-Line. Nah, I'm just messing with ya. I said earlier that the Frontrunner is the main spine of transit within the greater Salt Lake area, and there's no doubt that UTA has come to this conclusion as well. With it servicing a vast majority of the region, the Utah Transit Authority has come to an understanding that the Frontrunner is likely the best option to improve transit access in the region, and we can see that with a lot of the new BRT and TRAX connections starting and ending at Frontrunner stations. And if you're gonna have one piece of infrastructure that is the main part of your transit network, you might as well make sure that it's running in the best way that it can. So UTA is going to be making some massive operational improvements and service extensions. First is Sunday service. Many transit services in the greater Salt Lake area, such as TRAX, the Bus Rapid Transit, and the local buses, all face significantly reduced headways on Sundays. But for Frontrunner, it's significantly worse, as it sees no service on Sundays at all. This is luckily set to change soon, however, as at least Saturday level service will be coming to Frontrunner on Sundays in the near future. But Frontrunner isn't just getting Sunday service on its corridor. With demand being high for Frontrunner service, especially during the peak hours on weekdays, UTA is heavily investing on improving timetables on the service. With additional double tracking projects along the Frontrunner corridor, the UTA wants to provide service every 15 minutes during rush hour along the Frontrunner. This would make it a much more attractive option to riders needing to get between the many cities on the corridor, which is looking at expanding soon. One of the Utah Transit Authority's goals within the next 10 years is to expand Frontrunner service to the south of Provo and extend the Frontrunner corridor 15 miles to the south, adding on 3 new stations in Springville, Spanish Fork, and Payson. UTA has also looked into some further long-term projects for its Frontrunner service, including an extension north of Ogden to Brigham City, and even the possibility of electrifying the Frontrunner services. However, an extension to Brigham City would have a new challenge of having to deal with negotiating with Union Pacific, who own the trackage to the city, and the high initial cost and logistical concerns of electrifying any amount of trackage. Regardless, Frontrunner is still getting some major improvement in the next 10 years to service, and could even see even more improvements in the future if the momentum of expanding service in the greater Salt Lake area stays. One project that the Utah Transit Authority has been undertaking that does not directly add new service, but makes it much easier down the line to add it, is its corridor preservation. With the region still being covered in disused and abandoned branch lines from the older railroads that owned them, owning these corridors can make it much easier to build and provide transit to new communities down the line. With multiple corridors being acquired throughout the region in Salt Lake, Davis, Weber, Box Elder, and Utah counties, this will hopefully make the construction of future tracks or Frontrunner extensions much more affordable and quicker to build. The greater Salt Lake area is one that needs to keep up with its transit expansion and reduction of car dependency more than any other metro in the US. With the city prone to having some of the worst air quality in the world at some points, reducing the amount of trips that people take in personal vehicles is crucial to helping with air quality in the region. Because unless you're trying to sell canned air, I think we can all agree that visible air pollution kinda sucks to deal with. Salt Lake City and its surrounding communities have taken steps to address this, with projects not only to improve transit, but also countless micromobility and cycling projects that have happened in the city. In fact, Salt Lake City was the first US city to get a Dutch-style protected intersection. But I'm getting ahead of myself, that's a topic for a whole nother video. While the UTA network does have some disadvantages, including a lack of late-night service, heavily reduced Sunday service, and a lack of coverage of the frequent transit network, the UTA has at least taken steps to address 2 of the 3 issues. And with Salt Lake City listed to host another Olympics in 2034, hopefully the additional funding that the city and the surrounding communities will see will help push some of these projects to happen sooner rather than later. Salt Lake City is one that was heavily molded by the car, but it's been on the right path with transit building, and getting itself a whole transit network built out from nothing in 20 years. Is it, or will it ever be, a city with transit that can compare to, say, New York City or Washington, D.C.? Probably not, but you can't fault the region and its transit agency for actively improving transit over such a short amount of time. Salt Lake City absolutely punches above its weight for transit in a North American city in my eyes, and hopefully its future transit projects will help Salt Lake City and the surrounding cities like Provo and Ogden become more sustainable, less car dependent, and overall a better place to live. But have you ever been to Salt Lake City? What are your thoughts on the Utah Transit Authority and its future? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I want to thank Isaac, Fred, and Christian for helping me make this video, and I especially want to thank all of my patrons, especially Tony Stunts and John Schukites. Their support makes videos like this one possible, and if you want to get your name in the credits, early access to videos, extra content, and more, then feel free to go check out my Patreon. The link is down below. Also down there, you'll find the links to my socials. I post extra content and updates there. Folks, thank you so much for watching this video. Your support is greatly appreciated. I know this one took a little bit longer to come out, but I really hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see y'all on the next one.